Set up. Oh, thank you. A little bit higher. There we go. It's in. Perfect.
Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, it'd be like we'll take it again in December.
Teams project meeting. We'll get started. We'll try not to be too loud, so if there are other people who are coming by, fine. We've got a couple of new faces. Why don't we let our two newest folks briefly introduce yourselves. We have an economist from China.
Tim from China. And, I'm an exchange PhD in economics.
You have finished or you're working on a PhD?
No, I'm a PhD candidate in China.
Candidate in China. Okay.
Yeah, and I will stay here for 1 year. And my advisor is George Poland. I'm very happy to come here to talk about something. I believe I will learn more from you. Thank you so much.
What is PhD?
Labor economics.
Okay.
And my research area is about
What is the topic of your
migrants in China or all over the world.
Okay, so many of us are also working on migration, so that's great. So what do you have a data, or just tell us a little bit more? Do you have a particular city or all of China, or what are your units in data?
All of China.
All of China.
And I have a data set that was investigate all over the China about 352 cities in China. The samples is large, so I do some research about it from the.
Are your data cities or individuals?
Individuals.
Or individuals.
Individuals is about
20,000 individuals. So it's a survey of individuals, and you have their names as well of the cities where they live, care, work. Okay. And who did the survey? The census or someone else?
The government, one of the department of our government do the research, and I could easily, my advisor of China gets the data set from the government, but the data set is not open. It's controversial.
So you're here to work with George Tully initially, and George Tully has worked on, he's a pioneer in theorizing and analyzing data on amenities 30, 40 years ago. And I've been working with him for decades. I taught an urban economics course with him and so forth. And Edward Glaser, now at Harvard, was one of the students. So do you have an amenities element in your analysis? What is new in your PhD?
Well, you're a first year, right?
Yeah.
So
I'm the second year of the PhD in my project. The second year I come here. I will stay here for 1 year, and then I will go back.
So you say the first or second year of the program or of the thesis writing?
Program.
Of the program. So you do not yet have a topic. Is your answer?
No, I read some papers about migrants, and the first paper of migrants is about the number of the migrants and the company relationship between the number of the migrants and the GDP.
And the what? And the GDP.
And the second is about the effort of migration. The effect of migration from the view of which, and using the propensity score matching method. So I have finished it in Chinese, and I'm translating it into English, and I will finish the translate
Now these both sound like very nice topics that have distinctiveness, but also can overlap with amenities and scenes and other kinds of things that we're working on. So, and we also have several other people who've worked on migration as well as in some of these books. So this is very good. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of our Chinese participants are new as of 1 or 2 weeks ago. So you're all starting together. So that's excellent. I mean, it gives you a sense of you're in the same class. Okay. Demographic class. All right. Do you want to briefly introduce yourself? Sure.
Hey guys, I'm Jim. I'm a first-year MPP student here in Harris.
First year what?
MPP student.
Okay,
Yeah.
Masters of Public Policy here in the Harris School of Public Policy.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm taking one advanced track. Last year I graduated in Barcelona with a Master of Public Policy, Economics of Public Policy in Barcelona, and ethnically I'm Korean Japanese, but I moved a lot. My family's very international. My family is actually Canadian as well, but personally I'm American, more or less. And hopefully I will get to land some job in the EU, hopefully in Brussels, where it's the capital of the EU. That's where all the economics jobs are and all the policy happens. I think it's the leading area of policies in the world, so it's exciting for me to work in. So yeah, that's about it for me.
I have a question.
Yes.
So did you feel that Barcelona, Catalonia thing happening while you were there, or?
Yeah, actually.
Well, everybody was thinking, right?
Actually, yeah. When I was there, there was a massive march or protest, whatever you want to call it, demonstration. It was, 1 million people in the streets, and estimated by the Spanish government to be 500,000. Estimated by the Catalonian government to be 1.5 million. So let's just take the average and say 1 million. And it was just insane amount of people. You can't take a step because there's it's like a hexagon of people just surrounding you, so you can't move. So it was definitely one crazy experience. But yeah, I mean, Catalonian independence has huge ramifications to other EU states. Like for example, Scotland, especially because of the Brexit, and they want to use the euro currency. There's also Baltic states, Basque states in Spain, etc. So the chain reactions, I'm not sure about, but Catalonian independence has been around. The idea has been lingering around for a long time. I think it's exponentially, should I say, reaching towards the explosive point, the breaking point.
Okay. We have in process a book called Latin Scenes, and with a section on cafes, and more generally the idea of Latin scenes we talked about maybe two weeks or so ago, of street life, including parades, and using the street as a sort of theatrical location to build political buzz or
The
stage and feelings, and to mobilize energies which can have a political, economic, and social impact of attracting migrants or driving migrants away in conjunction with these kinds of things. So the point is these used to happen more in the Latin areas of the world, France, Italy, Spain, Greece perhaps. What's new is these are coming even to Hong Kong, Kiev, London, New York, Chicago. They're spreading around the world with social media, with ideas, even though in many places like China and Japan, these are very shocking, violating the standards that, citizens should not do this. Citizens should, stay at home but not be in the streets in this way. So in that sense, and more or less the same thing in Northern Europe. That is, so these are, it's a partially global, and this is one of Christina's themes, the globalization of some of these scenes-like activities and how they may link with globalization in restaurants, in religion, in non-governmental organizations, and ideas like sustainability, new themes which they then are measuring with OECD or Eurostat data or in other countries in ways that one can then try to capture how much these are happening. And combined with things like the PhD by Hisung is on public transit in Seoul, Paris, and Chicago, and how the public transit area, like a subway or a sort of a mall in Seoul, is a hot place for young people to have musical concerts, whereas in Chicago, people are scared to be in a subway and they run away from subway locations as fast as possible. So looking at those specific scenes and how they can be transformed is what our value added is to see. That is, many of our concepts, I mean, the term amenities is an economic term. So the definition for economists is a non-market good or a non-market good, service, or transaction. Okay, so it's simply it's not paid for. But clean air, good schools, police protection, these are all amenities. And the problem then becomes how to measure them, and that's what the Chicago economists have been doing for 20 years. So George Tully and others developed what they call the hedonic price index, which is to estimate a non-market good like clean air by looking at the places, the physical places like a zip code with cleaner air and dirtier air across, say, the whole US, and then you look at those places and then you look at their rent or their land value. And then you control everything else that you can. Income, education, race, crime, and so forth. So you control those, and then you try to say, how much is the elasticity or the value added by the clean air? And that's called the hedonic price index. That's the method for estimating the dollar value of 1 unit of clean air. And so that's what they did maybe 20 years ago, and that opened the door. Then you can say we can theorize and we can measure specific amenities, and in a sense we're extending that. What we do that's most different is not to study one amenity and to try to measure it one at a time, which is harder because it implies a necessary assumption, which is harder to realize, achieve empirically, of ceteris paribus, everything else equal. And to empirically estimate that is problematic. So our approach instead is to say a scene includes 400 or so amenities in different combinations: bookstores, museums, libraries, and all of these together. If we then say we have more libraries and fewer cafes in a particular area, how much do those transform the land value, the migration of people in age cohorts 25 to 34, 34 to 45 years old, and so forth. Then look at age cohort estimation as influenced by used books. Initially we started with used bookstores, cafes, and then warm climate. We found that the warm climate attracted older people, and retirees did not attract younger people. It made no difference. Whereas the built environment of cafes, museums, those attracted the younger people. Or they but the who was it here in class? Someone, maybe it's a class idea. Okay, a nice addition of the economists here was the following. Let me put it in. So they started to say, okay, we have cities which get more valuable, and the ones that get the most valuable we'll call superstar cities. These are simply the biggest, mostly the biggest cities in the U.S. New York, Chicago, LA, and so forth. And they're superstars because their value of land and of rent has gone up faster than the average. So if the average is growing up over 30 years like this, these have been going up like that. And of course the same thing in China. You have Beijing is through the roof. Beijing, Shanghai, very high value. But if you then try to say, how about, okay, does everything go up as well? That is, do wages and cost of buying groceries, cost of living, wages, land, rent, should everything go up with more amenities? And I'll ask our economist first. Especially wages. Should wages go up with everything else?
Yeah.
Should you pay people, or that is, now I won't say should you, I say empirically, do wages go up as fast as everything else in the countries where this has been studied?
In the past years, maybe the wages get higher, and the other cost is not higher, except the housing, because the price of the house in Beijing is very high. But other cost in Beijing is maybe it's same to the other places of China. It's not very high. The only high cost is housing. So.
But how about wages and why?
In fact, I think maybe it's need more laborers in Beijing, but the labor in Beijing is not enough. So the people from other places are flowing into Beijing, but and there is more opportunities in Beijing.
Okay, so that would be a rationale for change and for increasing migration if Beijing needs more labor. That is, there are more jobs than there are workers. However, if you get closer to equilibrium, would you still expect that the wages would be higher than other Chinese cities?
Yeah.
Why?
I don't know the reasons, but I calculate the different wage. If I work in my original regions, I could, for example, I could get a wage about 2,000 Chinese RMB. But if I worked in Beijing, I could get about 4,000.
Okay, but you're mixing too many things. That is, you're saying rural urban, or there are big rural urban differences. Yes, I'm saying if you have two cities that are identical, and one has more amenities and one has fewer amenities, but they have equal number of jobs and they have equal housing and so forth, would the amenities increase wages?
I don't know more about it.
Okay.
I think the wages. It's not necessarily about wages, but I think the higher skilled jobs will be attracted more towards the cities.
The economist would say that's a different question. You're adding a different variable. If we stay with that is, I'm trying to give you a very simple 2-minute course in 20 years of economics. And one of the most interesting findings over 20 years is, no, you're both wrong. That is, the more the amenities, the lower the wages.
Yep. Because people are willing to get less wage for the amenities.
That's the point. So the way I illustrate this in class after class, as 2 or 3 of you have heard, we ask, and I'll ask you right now, how many of you would take a job in a small town of 1,000 in North Dakota in the country that pays you $100,000 a year, or how many of you would take a job of $50,000, 1/2 the money, in New York, Chicago, or LA? How many of you would take North Dakota? One. Okay. So, see, he's from a smaller town in Texas, so but that is. And so, are you voting for the money, or are you voting because you like the small town life?
Actually, both. I prefer more money, and I prefer small towns. This is a win-win for me.
Okay. Now we see that he is unusual at the University of Chicago. Okay, he's an anomaly. So how many of the rest of you would take New York, Chicago, or LA?
Not LA.
Not LA. New York, Chicago.
Not an option.
Okay,
No.
so you're answering in the same way as most University of Chicago students, but that's the opposite of everything going up. You see, what this is saying: I have talent, I have human capital. There are many jobs that want me. I know that. I have choice. And young people, talented young people like you have lots of choice. You could go to jobs, all around the world. And so the question is, which place will you go? And the answer is, because I know there are many jobs, but I also want interesting amenities. I want art museums, I want cafes, I want shopping, I want this and so forth. Temples, interesting, smart people to talk to, and so forth. And so you're saying, I want Beijing, Shanghai, but I will also go there if I'm paid just a low wage. So this is as part of the assumption. What we had as a visitor for half a year the author of a book called The Ant Tribe. I don't know if you know the book. It was a best-selling book in China about 5 or 6 years ago. What is the ant tribe? Maybe you don't know the term in Chinese, or I don't know the term in Chinese. Do you recognize it at all? A little louder for the others. You know the book, the concept then? Say how does that fit? How does that fit this story? Just tell us. Try to match. Can you match the story of the book with the theory, the economic theory I've just given you? How do you join those two? They're consistent if you look. Why? First of all, what's the story? Who can? You know the title of this thing. Anybody? Several of you shook your heads. What's the story of the book? It's just descriptive. Okay, got an American and no Chinese. All right.
And Google it.
It's the thing with the universities.
So yeah.
The idea is that a bunch of university students in China, once they graduate university, they can't necessarily always find jobs, so they'll live in very dense and very impoverished conditions, basically together in a large group. They all work very well. They all have their degrees, but they don't have their jobs yet. So they work in they live in these tiny little areas called ant tribes until they get whatever job they're training for. The reason why they're called ants is that similar to ants, they're highly intelligent and hardworking, but completely anonymous and unrecognized because they live inside these
And
tiny little areas.
they're maybe 1 to 2 hours from downtown Beijing on a subway. So they travel like ants back and forth on the subway every day, morning and night, long distances, because it's cheaper to live outside in one room with maybe 40 people sleeping in beds in one room. And it's dirty, see, so it's cheap. So they're there, and so then the author of the book said, why don't you go home? You had a family in the rural areas. Why did you leave your family? And they say, oh, my family wants me to be in Beijing, and I can say I'm in Beijing. And they said, but does your family visit you? Oh, no, I don't want my family to see me here. No. See, so the image, Beijing, is what is the amenity of having the city, then its beautiful architecture and all of that is the positive amenity, but the negative amenity is they're paid very little. And so why do they go at all, economically or for other reasons? for the same reason that you said you would take the low salary and still be in Chicago, New York, or this is just an extreme. So I'm making the point that the Chinese students, the bestseller, are doing the same as you American voters and Chinese voters in this question, but the linkage of that book to the economic theory has not been made by even many labor market economists. Yeah.
In fact, I talk a little with Professor Tolley. We found that it's easier to find jobs in Beijing compared to other
Yeah, actually,
places.
I should look at my email, because he said he wanted to maybe join us via Skype a week or 2 weeks ago. Does anybody know if he wants to, does Professor Tully want to join us tonight via Skype? Yeah. Okay, so let's call on you, or checks, we checks for a couple of folks.
They don't have that much support in us. We'd rather do a Skype meeting directly for an hour. I'm free all day Sunday.
Okay.
What about the purpose?
Well, we can talk if we've got new things to discuss. Joey was in a car accident. I don't know if I said that out. So he's injured enough that he's not here. So he's resting for at least probably a week. So if his data are the main thing, that's holding up the important part. Yes, we haven't talked about yet.
Trying to fit in.
I've got behind on a bunch of stuff.
Yeah, okay. We'll figure it out together.
So Sam,
do you know how many are?
For Cammie, who's not here, this is clear. For David, I had the question as to whether the question is this in the summer or this now? Am I worried? Have you checked the date of the summer versus the fall work study time? We can't bill them to the summer now.
They were here before.
Got it.
So check that, and if it's not now, then we got to bill them.
Yeah.
I got to check here if it's for now. We can't do it until we get something right.
Is this possible, Mr. Carter, that you put this is one that I already gave you to look through in August.
It doesn't matter. Have I paid you before or not?
Well, so I went back to the and so I never got out of it. Okay, we'll talk about it later.
Well, what you did is irrelevant. The issue is, did you get the check and did they get the bill? And if the answer is no, well, we got to start over.
Okay. All right. I will check the box.
Okay. So George Tully.
Sorry, what institution? So
look on there because that's a video. I need a computer. I need this to work here. So, any follow-ups on the ant tribe or labor migration in China, or we'll change topics? But at least I just want to establish enough commonality here that we can see the overlaps. Let me question. Do you have data from Professor Tully on China, or you have only your separate data file? That is, does he have data on amenities in China, which you're using or he's discussing?
No. I don't discuss this topic. I discuss the effect of migration of China.
So the ideas and the theory, but not data. Okay, no, that's fine because he has some Chinese data, but I don't know what. And I think that a lot of it has certainly come from Chinese scholars, visitors, as well. That's working. Now we turn on.
Yeah, that got well. Same.
I see nothing here from George Tully. I will turn on Skype.
I see. This job is related to you.
Because of all like the live spaces. Because all like the last
Not until just to figure out, stuff.
George Tully. So George Tully is here.
Because there's this new building here. It's kind of reminds me of kind of design. That's like a third of it instead of like the kind of one of the cruise ship building. And it kind of like the images of that, like canisters of it, you know, like I don't know, it probably is a different architect, but it looks kind of reminds me of it. Yeah. The pyramidal kind of sharp point kind of.
Okay, so George Tully is off. Let's proceed. The idea of amenities then also takes the concept, say, of museum and elevates it a little bit and say, how does a museum have an impact on, say, labor force migration? Who moves to a museum and how much? That's one concept of one amenity. But what we're also doing in several of these conversations is to say, how does the scene, either all of Beijing or a particular neighborhood like Hyde Park or the surroundings of one museum affect, or a hospital, make that hospital more attractive than other hospitals? And so the differential effects of specific scene components, such as through in these kinds of amenities, are things that we're analyzing. Just for the record, we've got an extra data from the Chinese Ministry of Culture. So we have a lot of data on libraries, museums, and cultural centers, 3,000 across China. We have generally all of the Chinese county districts. And county districts in China are smaller than the cities. So Beijing has 16 county districts. And Shanghai is roughly the same. So we have these county districts are neighborhoods within Beijing. So in past PhDs and things, people have compared these, and we have a new manuscript on the Beijing districts and the amenities from Wu Jun, who's that I think some of you have seen.
Yeah, I see.
Okay. Yeah. Any reactions to that manuscript?
I found some mistakes.
Okay.
Mistakes.
Now go ahead. I mean, I asked you about mistakes, and so tell me. But what did you see?
He uses some method of economics, but he said it's not strict. In fact, he said that the GDP and amenities causal relationship. Maybe I think it is not called causal relationship. It should be called the company relationship between the GDP and
Yeah. So I don't understand. Is someone else or just can you restate that, or just talk a little more? I mean, is it the word, or is it a bigger concept that I'm not following?
So I don't know how could you spell it correctly.
Causal, yeah, causal relationship. Okay.
he said it's causal relationship between the GDP and amenity.
Okay.
But I think we call it a company relationship.
Association.
Association.
Not causation.
Association.
Okay. Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
Or association or a company relationship. It's we can't call it the causal relationship.
Well, I mean, this is, in a sense, you could say, this is true in many areas of life and of social science, that we're trying to build maybe causal models, but we start with associations. And then maybe if we get more precise data or models, maybe, but does he have does he just say it in general, or does he have a specific example of?
If we call it causal relationship, and the dependent variable, if the dependent variable changes, and then the independent variable will change, but in this book, the independent variable is GDP, and the dependent variable is amenities. If the amenity changes, he will.
Yeah, Christina is listening, so that she's going to respond to you. But go ahead.
Sorry, can you repeat what the independent variable was?
Yeah, independent variable amenity. In this book.
Okay, sorry, what was the dependent?
The dependent variable, if the dependent variable changes, the independent variable will change as a result of the independent variable. But if the GDP changes, maybe after the GDP changes, maybe the amenity change. So it's difficult to say that as a result of the amenity change, and then the GDP change. So I think it should be not called the causal relationship.
Well, yeah, it's kind of difficult to say that. For example, you can't say that GDP causes
maybe
the weather change.
Yes.
You can't say that. Maybe it's the other way around. Like, for example,
it's not difficult which one is independent, which one is dependent.
Okay, right.
So I think these two variables is a company or association relationship is causal relationship, I think.
I think especially in agriculture, it makes sense because like you can have good weather and you have good output from the farms, and good weather is an amenity.
I think this is one of the major problem among all these chapters. The author he compared the amenities among the 16 districts, and he said that there is a positive correlation between amenities and other variables such as the house price or the high-tech jobs. And then he jumped to saying that the amenities will improve the other situations. So he has some correlation, but yeah, I think the common problem in each chapter, his logic followed that. But he didn't really further approve there is a causal relationship.
A causal relation. We're going to turn to Christina in just a second, but anybody else commenting on the manuscript? This is very important because the book is about to go into production. So the question, and I found another error, obvious error, and so maybe you got more than one.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
He chose some dependent variables such as coffee and restaurant and other variables such like this. He do the regression between the GDP and the dependent variables. the result is some dependent variable is not significant, and the only significant variable is restaurant. But he used the results to analysis other programs. I think the result is not reliable, or it's wrong, because in the regression results show that the whole regression is significant, and some variables, the p-value and the t-value is not significant, and only the restaurant is significant. The result is the model is wrong, because there are some collinear relationship between the dependent variables. So the result is not accurate enough. So we can't use the results to analysis other things, I think.
That's what I found. I wrote him that last week, and he said, "Okay, I will delete all the regressions."
Okay.
So you gave one reason, but what was the simpler reason that it's an error that any of you may have seen? Why are his regressions wrong?
Is it okay to use this 16 district to run the regression?
They ran 32 numbers to make this analysis. Did they control other things?
He controlled about 12 variables, and he has how many districts?
16.
16. Yeah, that alone is a complete error.
Degree of freedom.
If you only have 16 cases and you have 12 variables, you do not have enough degrees of freedom to estimate properly because of the collinearity among the variables. With the n is too small. And I know it well because Divu did I brought you the copy. His book, we talked about how to solve this problem, and so you want better data. And so what Heesun did in her thesis was, what did you do for Seoul and Korea, for Paris and France, for Chicago and the US? So she studied the 3 cities, but she also, what did you do?
Well, I tried to supplement with the ethnographic study. So yeah, try to compare and understand what's the difference between the local areas in terms of the culture, subculture, how the public policy, 3 countries, U.S., France, and Korea, differently affect the use of public transportation. So I think in this case, because you don't have enough number of sample size, maybe option 1 could be, I don't remember exactly, but in China, the smallest level is county or something else?
Yes, yeah, that we have data for. The villages, but we don't have village data. That's
oh,
not
okay.
much.
So maybe you can search for the smaller unit that can give you more number of sample size. Or option 2 is just like what I did, you can do case study of a specific area.
Okay, but you did a case study of the specific area. You did the city alone, 3 cities, but then you also analyzed every county or every zip code in the entire U.S. So she had 45,000 zip codes in the U.S. and not just one city. And so in France, she had 30,000 communes. So these are big ends. So then you do not have collinearity problems. So when I wrote to him, he immediately said, yes, I know that's an error. I will delete the regressions, but I'm planning 3 books. The first book was conceptual, it's published. The second book is this one on amenities, a few small amenities just in one city, Beijing. The third book will be national with large numbers of cities in all of China. So he recognizes this, and I think he will be interested. But your first point is what Christina is our expert on. That is, what's the independent and what's the dependent variable?
Time.
Okay. She's worked on this for 7 years. So she knows everything about it. And one label that she has for it is chicken and egg. So what's the chicken and egg issue here?
Just the basic.
Yeah.
Thing, okay.
2 minutes worth for it.
So we check how the arts attract jobs and how jobs attract arts over time. So we have 15 years of data, and then we compare 2 time periods and see how the presence of jobs and arts we do 2 regressions. So like in one of them, arts is the independent variable in year 1, and then we compare it to jobs as dependent variable in year 2, and then we do a second regression that it's the other way. Okay, so like jobs in year 1 as independent, and arts in year 2 as dependent, and that way we can compare how jobs attracted arts and how arts attracted jobs, and see how the amenities helped create more jobs in a place. It's kind of, yeah, okay.
And so you can ask a general question: what is the causal relationship, as you put it there? And the answer is both. And then the next answer was, does the relative power of the one compare? How does the one relative power compare to the other? Do arts driving jobs, or jobs driving arts? And the answer is, in California and New York to Boston, arts drive jobs more, whereas in the South and the Midwestern smaller towns, it's the opposite. Jobs drive the arts more. So it's not just one, and it's not as if it's impossible to analyze. That is, you can find causality if you look closely, but you need the right data and the right model and the controls to try to estimate causality, at least in the same way that economists and geographers and sociologists currently, as we get more and more good data, more and more good theories, we'll have newer, stronger methods of estimating causality. But we're comfortable in the sense that we're doing the same degree of causal dynamics as most social science journals are doing. And there was an economic literature on this, on the chicken and egg, 20 years ago. Then they stopped. And so we're taking it up now again, because we've got, that is, we're transforming the literature with our seeds measures. So that makes this a new, interesting kind of question again. So, yes?
I want to say another problem in his book. So, can I go to another issue?
A little louder?
Yeah. Another problem in this book is that is the way the author counted the total number of a certain type of amenities in each district. Like, what he did is to compare the total number of amenities in all these 16 districts and some other, like the total number of restaurants and the total number of high-tech companies. And he would say that the district with the largest number of restaurants or museums also had the largest number of high-tech companies. I think this analysis or conclusion doesn't have much value, or it's just.
Can you restate it simply? I don't understand the key point.
What he says in his book, what he's finding, just he's saying that in those downtown area there were more cultural amenities and more companies, and so the amenities had a positive influence on this.
So you're
job.
making the same point, that he does not have a way, he does not have enough precision or specificity to distinguish causality from association. I think you're saying
Yeah.
that's her first point, isn't it?
Yes, yes, but it's a here he's not using the regression, but he just compared the total number of amenities in a certain district. I think this is also wrong or worthless. And he,
Why is it wrong?
I can do something because of my medicine.
Okay.
I have found some problems in data analysis. For example, the author analyzed the correlation relation between the amount of amenities and GDP of different districts, but the population of every district are different, very different. So,
In number or composition?
Yeah. The number of population of every
Size.
district, yeah, very
Right.
great. So it's more accurate to analyze the correlation relation between the amount of amenities per capita and the GDP per capita.
Okay.
If it is possible, it is better to analyze the increasing amount of amenities per capita and the increasing GDP per capita for a theory. So I think it's more accurate.
Okay, now that's a good point, that if he's mixing or he's using absolute when he might use per capita measurement. That's good, specific, clear. And he may have been, okay, we've used both on different occasions.
because when he compared these different districts, he didn't consider their different areas or population, just calculating the amount of like restaurants or bookstores or something like that.
Is your point that it should be, you're making the same point, it should be per capita
Yeah, I think it would be better.
rather than absolute number? Okay, D, these are friendly faces that want to help, Wooja.
Oh, hi. Professor.
We all are trying to help, and the most important time that you need specific criticism is before you publish the book, because after it's published, you can't change it. And I have published more than one error. Then students will see it for years. Okay. All right. Okay, so these are all excellent points you're making. Any other thoughts, suggestions for him or for us more generally?
I think in the book he takes the example of Beijing. I think maybe it's okay because the Beijing there are many regions, many districts in Beijing, and every district is the GDP of every district is different. It can stand the other regions of China, maybe. So I think the example is okay, but the sample is big enough, maybe. And in the analysis of in the page of 113
113.
Of this book, he showed that the significance is 0, but he don't write the process of the calculate or estimation. So I think if she want to make it perfect, she should
It's key.
yeah, and this part of her process of estimating.
I'm looking for a little food. We have food to distribute today. Maybe I didn't bring. Sorry, it seems to be. Maybe there's a banana. All right, I'm gonna have a banana, unfortunately, because I've been here all day. I'm about to pass out. I left the crackers somewhere else. Things to bring here. Actually, David nicely gave, or let Joey copy his data. For a couple of you new people, we have about 120, 150 gigabytes of memos and data that we could share with you. And for some purposes, it's good if you say, what is this variable? My answer is, I don't know. Search our files. So if you type in the variable name, and then you can find it if you have lots of files to search. So it's useful. It's too early perhaps for some of you, but I don't know if you have computers here today, but if not today, in the future, David, are your data on your computer or an external drive? I say, of an external hard drive. Okay, that's nice. And then you could, and so that's what you did, was plug that into Joey's computer. Yeah. Is this in Mac or Windows format? Mac. Okay, that's a problem. See, because most of the Chinese have Windows. Yeah. Do you all have Windows machines? Windows or Mac?
Windows.
Mac. So you have a Mac. You have Windows. You have Windows. Windows. You have Windows or Mac?
Windows.
Windows.
Mac.
Mac. Okay, so three of you have Macs, and you could use this.
It takes about 15 minutes. At least it's a long time.
Okay. And roughly how many gigabytes?
126.
Okay, I mean, so that's a lot.
Yeah.
But that's USB 3, working fast. And that's a good fast. We got a fast machine, a fast program. Okay, good. If you want, if you even want to today, that you could, would you even want to try to copy? Do you have room on your hard drive?
Not today.
Not 115. Okay. You say 115 or 150?
126.
126. Okay, so 126 gigabytes, GB. It's big. So.
126.
But David, would you have an easy way that you could put that on a Windows format? You got another hard drive?
What I would have to do is I'd have to take it from it, put it onto my Mac, and then I can put it easily on Windows.
Okay. No, if you've got room, if you've got space on your Mac, that'd be true. And do you have another external drive you could use in Windows format?
I do not.
Okay. Anybody else have this in a Ian or Christina or Eason? You don't have anything in a, you all got Macs. Okay. All right. Yeah, see, I had one Windows and one Mac, and somehow they're both lost.
Wow.
So I don't know where they've gone, but they've gone. And so I have not. I've been fighting fires in the Chicago version, and haven't been able to catch up on that. So for the three of you, I don't know. Is that an iPad? Can you or do you have a regular computer as well?
Yes.
So you have a regular.
Yeah, I have
also
computer.
Mac. Also Mac. Okay. And does it have enough space? I'm not sure. Okay. Well, maybe look up. That is the alternatives. We also have files on Dropbox, but they're more limited, and your free amount is only 2 gigabytes. You see, we have 120 gigabytes, so you can't access all that unless we. All right. we then normally do is go around the room. We lost Sam. He's focused on some specifics. Why don't we go around and see who has things we should talk about? David?
Small things for maybe afternoon to talk about.
Good. Okay. Ian? You sent me a log, but I haven't really gone through it closely. Do you want to run through the main points, or I'll look at it if we could use it?
I mean, the log, so I've been working on trying to make more concrete pictures of a couple things I've talked about, things such as kind of, try to run down like more specifically what I'm looking at, just kind of hoping to get some feedback on what I want to keep working on. And the other thing I did this week is I emailed Martha some...
By pictures, you mean photographs of Confederate flags in Pennsylvania, things like that?
I didn't email her pictures of that. I've been looking at some of those for my own things, but her I emailed...
Sorry, who?
Martha.
Martha, okay.
I emailed her some pictures of, because the Royal Ontario Museum I'm looking at and things, I think there's something interesting happening there with the use of the crystal-like structure. I think there's an argument to be made there, and I've been thinking through it, so that's
okay. Good. Okay. Isa?
Yes. I cannot present this time, so this time.
Oh, okay,
I'll be there.
That'd be great. I'll send you. I'll send you.
Keep busy. You're the.
So, I submitted abstract to NPSA once with my new ongoing topic of DB bicycle. And potentially, I think as we have such consistent data format for Chicago, LA, New York, and etc. I think I can analyze the effect of bicycle share on different things,
Just worried about
especially.
your leg is so close. It's a fancy camera. Just a little more prevention, please.
Not too close.
Preventive medicine.
Not at the face.
So I'm curious of the effect of DB bicycle and also other bike share on the neighborhood's economy. And since I have the business database, I think I will typologize these different types of amenities and see how like why people ride a bicycle in association with these types of businesses, and how it's affected by different conditions of weather, and compare in three largest cities in the U.S. LA, Chicago, and New York. And also I found that Seoul just launched the bike share last year, and it's actually very active as of now. People use the bicycle share a lot. And one of the reports that I recently viewed just a few days ago was that it's not the paper, it's just a report. People who normally use the bike share is the majority of the users are the white male, and those majority of people used to be public transit riders, and a lot of them actually substitute with the bike share from the public transit. And I want to see so what they do, like why they take the bicycle in conjunction with the business amenities and other types of cultural amenities.
How can you answer why? I mean, that sounds very complicated given the data we have.
Well, I have the block level data for Chicago, the business data, and I already, for the first paper for the postdoc project, I typologized these businesses into different types based on the basic service, employment, culture, etc. So I think I can use that with the DB bicycle ridership. The ridership.
Okay. No, so you you can typologize the businesses, but how do you capture, or do you really need to capture the motivation of the individual to do what now? What's the decision?
It doesn't give us an exact answer why people ride a bicycle to specific location, but if we see some sort of cluster of different types of businesses around these DB bicycle stations, we can analyze this.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you look at the amenities or the shops around the different
Yes.
stations,
Yes.
and then what might be an example that would show the interest of this?
So in general, in case of Chicago, people ride the DB bicycle most along the lakeside, and I'm wondering if that's different in different weather conditions, and also if they ride a bicycle to different locations besides the lake shore, then what they actually do with the DB bicycle. So last weekend I was at the Starbucks between the Roosevelt and the State, and there is a DB bike station right in front of the Starbucks, and also the Jewel Art School next to the Starbucks. And I was watching people just passing by, dropping off their DB bicycle, and I saw a lot of them. They wear a suit. Probably they just got off the work and they want to go grocery shopping, or they come to Starbucks for picking up coffees and stuff. So that was kind of my sort of motivation for analyzing why people take the DB bicycle and why people drop off that at the specific location to do what. So I'm still trying to formulate the regression model, but yeah, it's ongoing.
Well, at the early stage of a new idea, a new project, I try to talk to people and ask them, why are you doing this?
Yes.
And if you can just, if they're in a Starbucks, it's probably, and you should have a human subjects protection. I think you're covered by our general research. I should check, make sure this is up to date. But if you're interviewing people, that is, think about, ask yourself always, could I in any way harm this person by asking or him disclosing to me something that I did not learn by watching him or her? And if the answer is probably no, that is, I think we're okay, but we can't decide ourselves. It has to be reviewed by the Human Subjects Rights Committee of the university.
I was interested in how DB bicycle impacts on vitality of neighborhood, including reducing the crime rates in the neighborhood in different income level. So
okay, but wait, one thing at a time. If you're saying the goal of the individual, are you, maybe if you're only saying journey to work, I want to go from home to work, or I want to go from work to Jewel to shop, so you're shopping on the way home.
yes.
And then maybe I'll stop at Starbucks and I'll have a little refreshment and relax before I shop, and then after I shop on the way home. Is that all you're talking about, or is there more beyond that?
Well, that was the baseline, and I want to see how it's associated with the business, like how it's associated, how people use the amenities around the DB bike stations. So yeah, I mean they take the bike and they do something else afterwards. So that was my interest. I mean, I don't. Maybe
But you're not adding anything specific to what I said yet. Is there something more?
Well, yeah, I understand your question, but all
I'm asking for more precision. That's all. Maybe a hypothesis, but some hypothesis.
Yeah. The data gives us location of pick up and drop off of each bike. So that can give us some idea like where this bicycle travels. But I don't know what each individual uses the bicycle from one point to the other point and the other point. So that's kind of complicated issue.
Well, and your PhD was innovative in that you used the concept of bohemia in a very interesting way. And so you showed that in Paris and in Seoul and in Chicago, those neighborhoods that were more bohemian had people who used more public transit and more bicycles. Okay, if you take that idea, would that interact with that scene? If you have a more bohemian scene, would that lead to a change or a strengthening of any of the causal paths that you're talking about? For instance, if you're in Wicker Park, or let's say an uptown, let's say, or an Edgewater, if you're in an area which is a little more bohemian, would you, and you like that neighborhood, maybe you would like to have a longer Starbucks in that neighborhood and talk more with your friends or people who you're aesthetically closer to than if you're with people who are, you know, who don't like you and you don't like them. So the overlap between the tastes of the individual cyclist and the tastes of the neighborhood and the amenities around them. Okay, so how did George Tully measure this? You know George Tully's work? Okay, how much of George Tully's work do you know? How has he measured amenities in the last 20 years? I'm getting, sorry.
He worked in the energy, economic, and regional energy economics, regional economics at the top, and some policies of economics.
That's true, but that doesn't answer the question. A different measure of amenities. And the amenities for everybody that you should all know about this is if you were, and it fits the hypothesis you're sort of working from. That is, it gives you a hypothesis that fits what you're trying to articulate, maybe. That is, he's saying if you're born in a small, that is, if he has data for all the zip codes in the U.S., and if you're born in a county or a zip code with, say, and here's Ian, you know, small town, mountain biking, marching bands are important, and he's a marching band conductor, among other things. Churches are important, etc. Those amenities and the lifestyle with even, he even gets down and say the specific, you know, Sioux City, Iowa residents have this, so very specific. And Sioux City, Iowa residents would like to come back and live in that one place. And so in a sense you could say this comes from a Chinese rural conception that I want to live in my town always. That's the idea. And so you could say if my precise town is my ideal, but if I'm not in Texas, Ian said, okay, I'll still take the small town in North Dakota rather than the big city. Okay, that's Tully's idea. So the economics PhD took all of the zip codes in the U.S., all of our amenities that he took some of George's data. He took we had amenities data with the beginnings of our Scenes project, and he merged the two, and then he matched up the tastes with types of locations. That is, so you could have industrial configurations, call that one set of variables. Then you can have amenities variables, and then you could have divvy bike use as combining with those, with the idea that if you live in place A, you work in place B, which may not be your ideal in terms of personal consumption, but it's a job. But then you still have your business suit on, so you bike to a place where you can stop, but you can choose which of those shops to go to, or which, where to take your bike. So the hypothesis is they may go from work to those locations which are closer to their place of residence in terms of amenities. And then maybe this is not a big variable and maybe we can't measure it after all, but I mean, if we had more divvy time, we could measure how long they spent between the bicycle, that is either shopping or drinking coffee. And the hypothesis would be they'll shop longer and they'll spend more time drinking coffee if the neighborhood is more consistent with their choice of residential combination of amenities than if it is less consistent. How's that sound?
Sounds interesting. It's hard to test because it's not, as far as I know, it's not possible to track each subscriber, like where each subscriber travels, but we can track where this bike travels. So I have to think about it. But I agree with you because I want to link with the cultural form of the neighborhood and how that affects to the use of the bicycle. So for example, like in the neighborhood with the strong bohemian score, people go to coffee shops more often than any other amenities with a DB bicycle, something like that. So yeah, I have to.
Yeah, I guess I'm mixing this implicitly with a rider on our bicycle tour who I talked to, who asked me, where do I know where we have bicycle ridership data where one cyclist would carry his GIS, machine and then tell you, and then have this ideally, for thousands of people, where did they go precisely? And I'm trying to think. I mean,
is there an app?
Is someone working with Look Ansling?
Sorry?
Look Ansling is a new guy. Yeah.
I'm taking his class.
You're taking his class.
Yeah, spatial data analysis.
I mean, because he gave a paper on New York and where people were using their cell phones, I think.
I think I heard of it. Like people can track where other bicyclists are. Like it's more real-time based app. So like cyclists can know where is the heavy bicycle traffic each time. Is that the same app?
No, he just mentioned he's using a New York data, but he didn't mention that you can track other people's
where he had lots of red lines all over Manhattan and Brooklyn, where people were, I think they were calling on their cell phone, so that what his source was something like Facebook or one of the big internet user. Yeah, so it wasn't the Divi. Divi was, I guess I'm trying to remember from my imperfect memory. I think Divi was not the source, but if you had people's cell phone use, and they keep them on and they're going around. Okay, so short answer, we should keep going, but I mean, it's a new kind of thing where people are collecting a lot of new data, and if we could get something easily, it'd be worthwhile. On the other hand, the warning is, if you're from China or from anywhere, getting the new data from something like this to work is often 2/3 of the whole job. That is, it takes a lot of time. So I'd say whenever possible, use the data we already have and put your time into creative analysis. So you create per capita measures and build more careful models, and that has much more high value added than just assembling more data. Okay. Anything else, Hisa?
That's it.
Okay. Christina?
I don't know. I'm still waiting for you.
Yes. Okay. Now that's the main thing. This is version 8 or 9 of your PhD. Anything that is, I met with Brandon Sward in the last week because he's in a similar situation. I'm commenting on his stuff. He had a couple of specific things that he wanted references or things to read on. Are there other things that you're working on in the meantime, or you're not doing?
Dissertation.
Yeah, but what else can you be doing on your dissertation that moves it ahead?
I'll just start working on it, I guess. If that's okay.
Sure.
I sent it to James Evans and Jonathan Dingle, and I got a message back from Jonathan saying that he was going to read it last week. I'm not sure how that is. It's very recent, so but no reply from James Evans. So I guess my strategy could be to go to the computational workshop and see him in person.
No, I mean, you just have wait a little more. I mean, but the main thing is just go ahead and do the work on the PhD. I mean,
exactly.
What you did between versions 7 and 8 and 8 and 9 was, you added some actual findings that are interesting with discussion of the propositions and some preliminary results. But in my comments on versions 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 that I sent you, you have lots of work to do.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
Yeah, exactly. And especially the change in the industry structure in the U.S. That chapter should be like fairly quick for me because I've been working on that, like for other people. So it should be like the first one that I'm going for the low hanging fruit,
Good.
right? And that's it. So I'll start with that chapter.
Christina, tell us your name again.
Ting.
Ting Chi?
Yeah.
Okay, so the three of you, you overlap a lot in terms of labor force, occupational composition. These are very similar ideas. So I would say, you would probably find it useful to look maybe at Hee-sung's PhD and the proposal from Christina, and if you may find some problems or suggestions, and it could be very useful for everyone. Okay, so maybe let's try to any thoughts, and likewise the two of you. That is, you've got much more precise specifics about your example of the cyclist, and Christina's got this macro, the whole economy and so forth. But you then get your subsequent chapters where things get more precise, and in a related idea, I'll just throw out for maybe more the Chinese than the others is most of the literature in social science is about production, not consumption. And people in the past, maybe the world was more production and more capital investment oriented. It's becoming more consumption oriented, but we need both. And so one way we can do that in the areas we're working on with humanities and arts and neighborhoods is to look at some of those industrial categories that are closer to or further away from one or another type of scene or one or another type of art. So instead of just talking in terms of the normal census categories, what are the ones you have, say, from the city of Chicago?
Which one?
Yeah, you created your types And you got but the raw data was called what? What were some of it?
It's business license data from City of Chicago. So
Okay.
basically, they already have their own category of businesses, like food or retail, which some of them overlap with the NAICS code, but not necessarily all. So
NAIs, that's the U.S. Census, but those codes are very similar in China, Japan, Korea, France, internationally. So that's the nice thing, we can compare internationally with these. And those are codes like restaurants, churches, museums, and so forth.
What does NAI stand for? What does NAI stand for?
NAI.
North America Industrial Classification System.
So
Used to be SIC, so it's
and there is other code, which is SAC code. or something.
but that doesn't matter.
Yes.
But the point is that what I'm trying to say is the standard census categories have zero social science. We need to add social science. What's the meaning of these? So you've tried to do that in your classification, and one way that you can try to do that, and which we've emailed and we've got a little bit of this is in rough formulation, for instance, is to use, say, the 15 scenes dimensions. That is, which sub-industries or industries are more, let's say, family-oriented, or more localistic, or more religious, in ways that then you might have people, that is, people who print Bibles, or people who, if you have a nonprofit that serves blind people and they will read to blind people, and you have printing Bibles and reading to blind people, and you have a church where they do this as one of their services, those three industries, in a sense, can be mutually reinforcing more than people who are selling gasoline, for instance. And so that is different production and consumption activities connect in ways that economists have generally not tried to do. That is, they've looked at a market as a production and a consumption, and the market clears those two. But in a sense, this is sort of building on the idea of that markets are not random. That is, they're based on people, things coming together where people can create sub-markets that have a logic. So Hollywood has many people who do costumes, stages, or they're stunts. They know how to jump. They have acrobats. They have people who do makeup. So you have thousands of those little jobs, and they come together. Or in New Orleans or in Texas, you have people who are in the oil industry. So the oil industry is not one company. There are thousands of little companies, and they come together and they create the oil industry. So if you have, and they know that they need to be together to work, and they're concentrated in oil locations: Alaska, Oklahoma, Texas, Louisiana, and so forth. So if we think of the arts, nobody's done this for the arts, but we have 72 measures of arts categories for the U.S. We have maybe 30 or 40 for other countries. And how we can put those together, because they're both production and consumption. That is, we're using the basic data are really production data, or that is, these codes are thought of by the census as being more jobs. And their background, their jobs, they're thinking as production and economists, but they're narrowly saying, we collect taxes nationally, or in the case of Chicago, you're taking the data
it's
for.
More about the company, about like the resulting, like the products from the companies. It's not even about jobs. That's too people oriented.
Sure. No, so the unit is the company, but it's the company that would pay, I'm just making the simple point, which is clear in the documents that I would read from France. The French government is very, if you want to start a new job, you must tell us this. Whereas the U.S. documents are not so forceful. So then I said, wow, this is really for tax collection. And so that mean, so the tax collection goal is different from, you know, how does the market work? I mean, how do they come together? And there's almost no work on this, especially in the arts area, but there's lots of data. So Christina's got, you know, how many thousands of categories in your next?
No, not thousands.
No, but
like
roughly.
Hundreds.
Hundreds. Okay.
Maybe
Okay, but
the
no, but
300s.
okay, but so you've sampled them, and all the next categories are there 4,000 or 5,000?
I don't think so.
Okay, so maybe not so
No.
much. All right, but basically lots.
Yeah.
And so and we have Chinese data that go down to the county district level of vending machine repairmen.
Wow.
Very precise.
That is very specific.
For example.
Yeah.
So the Chinese government collects and have given us very precise data for every county in China. And so that's much more precise than, you know, service or industry or agriculture. Those are the old classic three, but that's garbage. I mean, we want subtlety of how they work. Then as I talked about today in class, the aesthetics, the dimensions of, you know, of the 15 can have more power in explaining, say, a vending machine or a television repair than you know, just electrical work, which would be much bigger. See, so as you get down to more precise categories, these are more powerful for combining as building blocks into a better PhD. Okay. All right. How's our time doing?
10 minutes.
5 minutes. Okay. Who else has anything that we haven't talked about? We had pretty good. I mean, we had a discussion of Wu Jun's, but anything else that any of you want to discuss individually that you've been working on?
I've sent you a log this morning, but you haven't replied yet.
If you sent to me the same morning we're meeting, I will never reply. I need it a day or two before.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that.
But if you got one or two quick ideas or questions.
So I will make my story short. It's because I'm reading your Scenescape and also your book of the CBS and Entertainment Machine, and these two basically says and also there's Christina's paper of jobs and arts, that paper. That basically says there may be jobs or to say the area of artistical things that attract people to go there. But I'm thinking maybe from the perspective of the individuals, but because the individuals may vary in their ability to go to that area. So I'm thinking maybe for example within a city, people may live in or to have activities in different areas, and maybe people with better or higher amenities, and while others people with weaker abilities may have lower chance to go there. I think maybe this could to be viewed as a spatial distribution of things that and I asked you in your log that whether this direction was more exploration.
I guess my instinctive first reaction is yes, but we all know that. That is, it's too simple.
Okay. Yeah.
That is, if you have more education, more human capital, more physical capital, maybe. But I guess I'm saying yes, but let's build that into a model that gets more complicated. Let's join that with something about the taste or the the consumption practice and the production, so that is the variables that the other people are working on plus that. And it's like saying education is important. Yes. Money is important. Yes. Higher occupation is important. Yes. So the things that Whitney was talking about today at the end, everything you said is what she talked about is related to creativity, but it doesn't distinguish. That is, the bigger problem is there are no specific propositions except more leads to more. And so, but that's why I said more leads to more, I asked, and what did we answer? Not always. And that was interesting. That is, more leads to less was the counterintuitive result. So I'm trying to say we need better theory.
My example I used in the log is that maybe like because different skills are like
different what?
Different skills that
skills.
The individuals have could count as their ability, and the labor market actually desire maybe they desire some kind of skills more than other skills. So my hypothesis is that maybe for the college graduates, their major backgrounds will have influence on their ability to get the place.
Yeah. Okay. I did read that.
Yeah. So I'm using the college majors. So.
Yeah, I guess my worry about the major is that there's a fair amount of. I mean, the question is what's endogenous and what's exogenous. I mean, that is is it too close to the. I don't know, Christina. What's your reaction to that?
I don't know. I'm so busy here with my trying to get my Oscar in photography that I heard half of it.
Okay. But does your major in college make a difference?
Oh.
And that is, in my quick reaction, that the variable is too endogenous. On the other hand, endogenous to what? I mean, there are two ways to go. I mean, one is that if you're from rural Texas and you really are inspired by the music of the band, you carry that with you. On the other hand, it's also true that there's some people who say that I want to maximize either, I mean, some books say income, that is the non-economists say maximize your income. The economists say they want to maximize utility. And utility includes amenities plus income, and then that gets more income. But if you're saying you want to, that is, you will change your major if you think there are more jobs that will pay more in that major, you may choose that major. And so it's not the interest in economics or getting an MBA, it's an interest in being able to support your grandmother if you're Chinese. Okay. All right. So, or your grandmother may be interested in it. But in that sense, I guess in either case, or here's an example maybe where it takes on more power. Lipset and Solari did a book called Elites in Latin America, and they compared all the Latin American countries, and their typology was the old Spanish hacienda style, where the elite did not work. They were aristocrats, and the slaves worked the fields and so forth. And so the style is still to dress for the court, and as they said, as I wrote, about New Orleans in the 1830s, the men go horseback riding and they go to parties, dancing. So they dance and they ride horseback. Okay, that's aristocratic. And so that you have in most purely in Colombia, Latin America, which is closest to the Spanish background. Everybody knows the names of the top families in Colombia, and they go back 400 years to Spain. Whereas in Mexico and Puerto Rico, it's the most close to the U.S. Nobody knows where they came from, and they're not linked to a particular family, and their educational majors are engineering and business, whereas in Colombia they major in law and basically law, and because they will become political leaders and gentlemen. in the old hacienda style. Okay, Brazil, Argentina, Chile are in between, basically. Because in the 19th century they had migrations from people who were not so elite. They were not the old Spanish conquerors. They were smaller, poorer people from Greece or Italy or Spain, and they created shops, or they became small people selling small things. There were more Jews who were entrepreneurial, and they developed new industries. And so the economies today are much stronger in Argentina, Brazil, Chile, and they're weak in Colombia. So Colombia is economically retarded. They have 30, 40-year drug war. It's been going on. I mean, and so you have lots of civil war and difficulty of resentment to this elite, which conflicts, of course, with the rest of Colombia, with the rest of Latin America and the rest of the world. And so, if you use so this is a way of typologizing the majors that had explanatory power for economic growth and so forth. Now, if we could come up with something like that, which makes sense, and this is more probably the past than the future. But, and we'll talk a little bit more about this in the course. I mean, it is England versus continental Europe is a little bit the same. That is, England people in coffee houses develop stock markets and insurance companies and out of betting, whereas in France, the court and the cafes were not for that. You're supposed to be polite and civilized. Maybe pretty and flirtatious. But not do business and not have a stock market. Okay. So it's Versailles versus London.
And that's happening.
What's
Trump
that?
threatens the press.
There we go.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Oh no.
Now, Habermas is the main source we'll use on this. And we got data. We have data from cafes, and we have data on the Facebook business sites of individual cafes. Did you hear that presentation a week or so ago on Wednesday? In terms of your thinking about topics, it overlaps a bit. By Ben Picker at the beginning, sort of a short guy who talked fast. Maybe you didn't hear. Okay. All right. But he's got all the Facebook data. You didn't Facebook business. You're shaking, but your expression says I don't remember.
You mean the guy has left, right?
He's not here today.
Okay.
He was here about 2 weeks ago. Did you hear him talk?
Is that a talk or?
He talked in our Wednesday scenes meeting for maybe 10 or 15 minutes at the beginning.
I think I was there.
Okay.
I was there.
Okay. I'm just saying, think about those data as a method of giving meaning to a major. That is, I'm trying to say, to each of you, you're talking about, you've got raw data from labor force, divvy. So I'm trying to say you need some concepts and hypotheses for these raw data to become social science and to be good social science. That's what you need. So if we start and try to work on it and go through 8 versions and 9 versions, that is, you're here because you want to get better and better and better, right? Okay. Should we end on that? Good. All right. Cheers. Actually, we sometimes have Mitch give us a. Ian, we should ask. I mean, you're in the divinity school, but we ought to call on you to give us a little word of inspiration at the end.
Wait.
And it could be musical, or it could be something else. Or you could pull out a Confederate flag and wave it.
In this trying time that we find ourselves with Trump and everything, but
as you're looking right at God Trump up there.
Good. let's just remember that just say no to Confederate flags and Nazism, and just keep that in your minds as you go throughout this week. These are all bad things, but keep your eye out for them and let me know so that I can record them later.
Thank you, sir. All right.
Just a quick question.